Hey folks, Quilly18 here, and welcome to another episode of Let's Play Kerbal Space Program. The last time we played, we had done a moon mission, returned back to Kerbal orbit with a bunch of science experiments in here, and loaded it into our science lab over here. Our science lab takes that scientific data and actually crunches it into even more science than before. If you let time pass, you can then transmit this science back down to Kerbal. It lets you multiply how much science you get from your various missions. Now I have let time go by, and I've let several iterations of this data burn through, submitted the science back home, and then reloaded it with science experiments that were still on this docked ship over here. I think we're nearly empty at this point. Now, as is, this setup still has plenty of life support. We actually can see we have over a year left of life support, and that's with all 5 Kerbals present. If we go and detach this lander module and only have 2 Kerbals left over here, we should have even more food left because it's a giant chunk of life support over here for just 2 people. That being said, at some point, we are going to need to do a refueling mission, and that's why all the science that I've transmitted home from this, I have put into jet engine research. And you're going to say, wait, what? Jet engine research? Yes, the reason I've done that is because I want to, for the very first time, build a single stage to orbit vessel. That is a true space plane. Not just an airplane that flies around, but a plane that goes to space, completes a mission, returns home, and lands all in one piece so that you get all your money back for your mission, less the fuel spent. That is going to be our goal in this video, but possibly over a series of videos we're going to see. Now, in my research development facility, which I have now had to upgrade to full, which spent a lot of money. Luckily, I had tons of cash to spend, but we burned through quite a bit of it. I have gone down this branch over here from flight, supersonic flight, well, aerodynamics, to supersonic flight, to high altitude flight, and finally hypersonic flight. I believe hypersonic flight is going to be fully required for a single stage to orbit. Possibly someone could make our mission go without that, but the problem is this. We are going to use jet engines to get us as close to space as possible. Why? Jet engines are considerably more fuel efficient than rocket engines. The reason is, all these engines work very simply. Action, reaction. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Engines throw stuff out the back. These types, rockets and jet engines, they work because they throw stuff out the back, which causes the vessel to move forward. That's the entire process for how this functions. You shoot stuff out the back end and you go forward. Now, in the case of a rocket engine, the stuff that gets shot out the back is primarily all the sort of like exhaust and residue from your fuel. Most of the mass of your rocket fuel isn't really used up in the actual reaction of making sort of the explosion. A lot of the mass is there to kind of get shot out the back of the rocket. Whereas with a jet engine, they operate instead. Their fuel gets burned to accelerate air. The jet engine sucks in air and then accelerates the air and shoots mostly air out the back. Sure, there's some exhaust and different things like that, but most of what gets shot out of a jet engine is air, which means you don't have to consume as much fuel to get your equal and opposite reaction kind of effect. Also, you don't have to bring oxidizer. Oxidizer is kind of like nearly half of every jet fuel tank you ever bring up, and that's the thing that you need to cause the reaction to burn because there's no oxygen in space, whereas there is oxygen in the atmosphere. So that's one aspect of the jet engine. But jet engines don't tend to have as much raw power as a rocket engine, which means going straight up with a jet engine often isn't feasible. However, you can, of course, always use wings. I mean, you can use a rocket engine and throw some wings on there if you wanted, and wings can, of course, generate lift. As a result, your jet engine doesn't necessarily, it can actually have a thrust-to-weight ratio below 1, because it's mostly just sending you sideways, and you're looking for your wings to slowly rise you up. Now, we need to unlock hypersonic flight because of 2 factors. And that is both an engine requirement, which is what you're going to use this Rapier engine for. This is a jet engine, although it's special in a couple of different ways. And we also need the shock cone intake. let's go and talk about exactly why that is by rigging up a little demo. Now, I did do a couple of tests. I'm going to show you two little test planes that I put together that didn't get the job done. And we're going to talk about why that is and why we need the shock cone intake and why we need the Rapier intake. I've got the Spaceplane Supplier Mark 1. So the point of our spaceplane is to bring supplies to our space station. This was my first attempt over here. This thing, first of all, I think it looks super duper awesome. It also flies exceptionally well. It's got a fantastic glide ratio and a really, really, really low stall point. So it can actually come for a super incredibly gentle landing. Even at 40 meters per second, it doesn't stall, and it's still, like, you know, nice and relatively horizontal. 40 meters per second with no engines, just drifting very nicely to the ground. Really easy to land. But when you get up too high and the air gets too thin, there's not enough air coming into the engine to keep the engine burning. And this setup with this air intake will flare out at just shy of about 25,000 meters. It'll run out of air. Now, that's fine. At some point, you're always going to run out of air, and you're going to have to rely on your rocket engine. And 25,000 meters above ground might be fine. Again, the hardest part to getting to space isn't going up. It's actually going sideways very fast. Well, getting to space is all about going up. Staying in space is all about going sideways very fast. So the fact that it flares out at 25,000 meters isn't necessarily the end of the world, as long as we're going sideways fast enough that the delta V in our center tank, which in this model is about 1,000 meters per second, is going to be enough to get it to orbit, which means we'd have to rely on our jet engines to get us to a speed of maybe, you know, depending on various factors, at least 2,000, if not 2,500 meters per second. I don't remember exactly what the orbital speed required for Kerbal is, and of course some of our delta V is going to be used to go up as well, so somewhere around there. And the problem is that both this air intake as well as this jet engine actually has a maximum effective speed. Once you get past about Mach 3, because of, I don't know, presumably in real life it would be, you know, various airflow dynamics and things like that. In-game, it's just a hard-coded in, well, sort of like graph or limit where you start to lose performance. Once you get past about Mach 3, and at that altitude, you're talking about about 1,000 meters per second, you start to lose a lot of your intake and a lot of your jet power, and you really can't go much beyond that. You might be able to hit about 1,200, but that, I found, is about the limit over there. I do have these external fuel tanks over here that I carry up a little way and then ditch over there. So technically, it's not a fully reusable single-staged orbit, but it's pretty darn close. Now, I came up with a second version to see if I could squeeze out a little bit more performance over here. It has a much longer rocket stage, and here it's about 1,400 meters per second delta V. So, of course, because it's having to haul more fuel, even though I've got twice as much fuel, I don't get double the delta V. I also tried a couple of different air intake combinations and things like that didn't really cut it. In particular, actually, this air intake actually is less good than the one I was using before. Tried to add the radial ones here just to suck in more air, but it ended up being about the same. This one did go slightly faster, but still flared out at about the same height and didn't really get a whole heck of a lot more speed because, as it turns out, just adding more air intakes doesn't solve the problem that they become very inefficient past Mach 3. Now, these are all the techs before hypersonic flight. This is before you get the shock cone intake and before you get the Rapier engine. Now, what's the deal with them? The deal with the shock cone intake is interesting because its air intake amount is actually lower than these others. This air intake of the shock cone is 2.0. Okay, as far as I know, like the intake area, the bigger it is, the more it can suck in. But I think ultimately the intake is this number here. It might be a multiplication, I'm not sure. But the air intake is 2, although it is a very big intake area. If we compare to this thing here, which is on this model, it's also a 2 for an intake area. Actually, it has the same intake area, 0.74, 0.75. Okay, about the same of the two air intakes. But the difference is that the adjustable air ramp intake here tends to lose air input at about Mach 3. A slightly better intake than this one in theory would be one of the ones that's sort of inline. The engine nacelle, the divertless supersonic intake, and the engine pre-cooler. These all, I believe, have an air intake of 5. Okay, no, the radial one doesn't here. It's in like an inline radial. But these two both have an air intake of 5. They also have a little bit of fuel built in, which is cool, but they still have the problem where they lose intake at Mach. So that's one of the things the shotgun intake doesn't necessarily take in that much more. It may or may not, depending on exactly how these numbers work, but it does it consistently at all speeds, which is good. The other part of the equation is the engine. Now, these rocket engines all have, starting with the Juno, which is the smallest, then the Weasley. So the Juno is like a tiny little guy. And then there's the Weasley, which is sort of like a scaled up Juno. Followed by the Panther, which is an afterburning turbofan. Which has an afterburning mode, which gives you a lot more power, but burns a lot of fuel. And then finally ending with the Whiplash. All these jet engines have a top effective speed, after which they rapidly lose thrust. Now, with each one of these, that top effective speed goes up. So where the Whiplash gives you the best range, more raw power, and at slightly higher Mach speeds. But they all fail at the higher ones and put a real limit on your speed. The Rapier engine here has a slightly higher range. It stays functioning as a jet at a higher Mach speed, but the big impact of the Rapier engine here is that it actually has 2 modes. It can swap from acting like a jet to acting like a rocket engine. In rocket engine mode, it no longer needs an air intake. It does require oxidizer. The same sort of, when you've got a normal fuel tank, you've got liquid fuel and an oxidizer. So in rocket mode, it requires burning oxidizer. Now, it's not quite as sort of efficient and optimal as a pure rocket engine, but while you could do some sort of combination, sort of like I was going here, remember that at any given time, only one of these types of engines is effectively being used. I'm either using the jets or I'm using this one. The rest of the time, it's dead weight. So the advantage of using the Rapier engine is that at no point it's dead weight. It's always being used, and therefore you get slightly better performance out of it. So what I'm going to do is I think I might actually adapt this design over here and make some slight changes to things. Hopefully, it's not the sort of thing that's too complicated to follow. Actually, I kind of want to see if I can make that first one work, because it looks super cool, right? It looks super cool, and we can all agree on that. Absolutely. So, just to review what we've got here is I've got a probe core, a battery. I then have a reaction wheel. This is a reaction wheel over here because when we get into the thin air, the actual control surfaces aren't going to do much at all. I don't know if the Rapier has gimbling. It does have a little bit of gimbling, which means you can steer a little bit with the engine, and then we'll have the reaction wheels. It then has a RCS fuel tank. That's for our reaction control system. These little things over here, that makes it much easier to dock. This thing at the front is one of the other things I've unlocked. This is a docking port. It's the regular Clampotron docking port, regular size, but it's shielded. This shield is slightly more aerodynamic than the naked port, and it's shielded from heat. Now, it may be that this is still so unaerodynamic that we'll want to come up with some alternate idea. I could have a naked docking port there and then a nose cone attached to it that we discard the nose cone at some point. That is entirely possible, but we're going to give this a go at some point. After that, I've got 5 of these life support containers. This contains about half the amount of life support supplies that the station can fit. And it probably, for 2 Kerbals, probably represents a year or more of supplies. Something like that, so it's quite good. I then have a regular FL-T800 fuel tank. This is a rocket fuel tank that has a combination of both liquid fuel and oxidizer. Okay? After that, I have, and we'll get rid of, these engine pre-coolers. This is both an air intake for the jet and puts a little bit of liquid fuel. Not much. And the not much part is why I had these external tanks. But I'm going to go ahead and pull them off now, of both sides, because I don't want that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this engine pre-cooler and this jet over here. Now, my wings are attached to that. So I'm going to pull off the actual wings over here. Then I'm going to remove this. So I'm going to replace this with an actual tank of regular liquid fuel. Because, of course, our Rapier engine will be able to feed off this, but I want to make sure we have more liquid fuel, because in jet mode, it only burns liquid fuel. So I want to go ahead and throw a little bit of that on. So the Mark 0 is the tiny one. It's too narrow and maybe not long enough. we're going to go with the Mark 1. It's very likely that this is going to be way too much fuel, but we're going to have to find out. So I'm going to go and put it there. I'm then going to go and throw on the shock cone intake at the front. Looks a little funny with things hitting there. I don't think they actually cause problems to one another. Mostly just look stupid. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to take this and move it a little further forward. We'll have to double check the center of mass at that point. Now, I'm going to pull off the rocket engine, and so now the question becomes one or two of the Rapiers. Fewer engines you have, the lighter your ship, therefore, the more fuel efficient you are. The only question is one powerful enough to get you moving properly? Here we're looking at surface level thrust of 0.63. We're also looking at 35 frickin' minutes of burn time. I think this is way, way, way too much fuel. Way, way, way too much fuel. First of all, I'm going to call this a Mark III, because I'm going to save my progress here in a second. This is too much liquid fuel, and we could probably save a lot of weight. Now, if I right-click on this, I can toggle the mode. So now it's going to be in closed cycle, where it does not take in oxygen, it just burns oxidizer. And here we have about 1,000 delta V. And that's going to be the same whether or not these liquid fuel tanks are on here, because right now we're limited by oxidizer. I'm suspecting that's not going to be quite enough. So I'm going to make a slight tweak to design here. I'm going to bring less pure liquid fuel and a little bit more of the mixed. Whoops. Oh, you're attached there right now. Okay, let me grab you, keep you on symmetry mode, move you forward so you're attached to that. Now I can remove this. And so let's try something like the Mark 1 liquid fuel tank there. You can see, like, I'm doing tons of little tricks just to make it look slightly cooler by having things inside of one another. So that's less liquid fuel. And then, I don't know if this would cause problems. Let's say, put the Rapier here. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm then going to grab a T400 tank there. And then maybe an extra couple of T400 tanks on the side. And then put the shock cone intake back in front. I don't suppose, under aerodynamics, some of these have fuel. I just searched for this. See, some of these adapters have it. I'm just trying to make it look cool. So I guess I'll just use one of these adapters. Oh, these are the bigger ones. Maybe there's not one that will do. I was trying to try to put like a reverse nose cone on this. But I guess it's no good. All right, what are we looking at now? If I close this, now we've got 1,700 meters per second. So that's how much I've got in closed mode. Plus I have, well, right now 28 minutes of burn time in open mode and jet mode. Really what I want to do is I want to be able to, on just the cylinder over here of pure liquid fuel, I want to be able to reach maximum sort of jet effectiveness. And then at some point turn to the closed mode and go there. Let's give this a try and see what happens. You know, we're playing it by ear. So oh, it doesn't line up the same as before. If I do this, again, trying to make it look kind of cool. And then what I did is I went into move mode, I grabbed this, and I just offset it so that it was no longer like blinking back and forth. Oh, I want to turn off snap so I can get it looking, I don't know, down. I want this one just above. I want that. So now the question is, what is our center of mass and center of lift? Okay, the center of lift is slightly ahead of the center of mass, which is bad. Now, as this goes, the center of mass should shift toward because these tanks will empty, but not soon enough. So I need to, well, if I just use the move tool. I mean, this is also shifting the center of mass backwards, which isn't great. But I can do this and help to move the lift backwards. There we go. It's just behind the center of mass. It's not going to, like, aim for super stability here, Unfortunately, the further back, the more stable, although less steerable. But again, as the back drains, then it should be okay. And this is going to be fine. We don't need something that's like... It's going to be slightly unstable, that's right, because it's a little close to one another. But I think that's going to be okay, especially since we have a little bit of gimbling from this. So let's save this. We are missing a few things. Oh, this is going to be a test launch. We probably won't get anywhere close to space. But let's at least act like we might. Oh, I'm going to middle click this to go into regular radial symmetry as opposed to mirror symmetry. That way I can put 4 of these RCS modules on here, same as on the front. And we would ultimately, because it's a drone, we are going to need a antenna so that we can receive signals from home. And solar panels. The Rapier doesn't actually create electricity, so that's part of it. Now, I don't know. I guess we'll have a pair of these on top and then have to orientate correctly. Let me do that and then throw a couple of flats here and on the other side. There we go, so we can passively gain just a little bit of power gain, just in case. And we basically have all the angles covered. From the front, we've got that. From the side, these solar panels will also work. And then from the top and bottom, we've got a little bit. That should be more than enough. We've got about, I think we've got 1,000 electrical units of power in here because there's a battery plus the probe core. So I think we're going to be okay. Oh, we are missing a rudder, which is probably a good idea. So now, when you're going supersonic here, these little ailerons, or these elevons, don't actually have a ton of surface here. The faster you go in the thinner air, they might actually be able to do a whole heck of a lot for us. So we may need to do a little bit more. We may actually want to double up on them. Actually, that's not a terrible idea. I'm just going to alt-click and copy over here so we have more of a control edge. And I want maybe this winglet here. This winglet here, turn on snap, and go like that. The entire thing twists, so it should be pretty good control. All right, our wheels are just behind our center of mass. If they were ahead of the center of the mass, then the butt would fall and hit right away. If the further back it is, the further back the wheels are, the more stability on the runway. If you end up finding a plane that drags to the left or right, probably you need to move your wheels back, or there might be too much weight for the wheels, but that was not the case here. But if it's too far back, you're going to have a problem tipping up on takeoff here. But I think we'll be okay. So we do have the extra control surfaces here, which may or may not actually do much for us, but we'll leave them in there anyway. All right, well, let's give this a try and see what happens. There's no pilot, so at least we can't kill anyone. Oh, I missed the final cost of the plane, actually. Last time, the ones I did before this model here, I think we're running at about 25K, which isn't bad, especially doubly so because it's reusable. Honestly, 25K, you can kind of throw that away. But now, there's not much of a payload on this, but it's a good learning. This is how we're going to learn some things. One thing I didn't do is hotkey the Rapier engine to be able to toggle mode. However, I think, is it on automatic switching now? I think so. This will automatically switch from jet mode, air breathing mode, to rocket mode, or closed breathing. And I think it's set to automatic now. We'll see if that doesn't work. Well, we can always manually toggle it, or, try a different mode over there. I'm going to go ahead and enable, I've got it's called atmospheric autopilot over here. It basically, if you're on master switch and you got fly-by-wire, basically this causes the Kerbal planes to actually mostly be controllable more like a real plane. It puts a little buffer between your keyboard inputs and what it actually sends the control surfaces, because the Kerbal's control scheme is really optimized for frickin' jet stuff. So we'll go to SAS on, full throttle, hit space to go. So if we watch, say, these air intakes, let me get you over here and get the thrust on the Rapier over there. You can see the numbers. The flow is improving as we go faster, and the thrust is improving as we go faster. So I'm going to try to tip up, hopefully not hit our butt. Nice little lag there. Thank you very much. That was helpful. Positive rate. Bring in the gear. Speed is increasing. So not at a crazy rate. I'm very tempted to think I'm going to want twin engines on this. But, yeah, because this acceleration is not really stupendous. and it's possible we'll have a hard time reaching our maximum rate. But our thrust is still going up now, and will continue to do so as our speed increases. So what I'm aiming for here is an angle at which our speed continues to increase while we climb a little bit. I'm not super concerned with my speed overall right now. When I get past 10,000, my goal will really be to go to horizontal and build up as much speed as possible. But I'm very concerned that there's just not enough oomph here. We may need to double up on these engines just to have enough get up and go. Because there's going to be some drag all the time. We might have a hard time hitting our top speed. So again, our goal with the jet engine here is twofold. We are looking to both climb as high as possible for free without having to start burning our oxidizer. Yeah, I guess everything is linked, so I don't actually have to worry about what everything is drinking from. Although, if we open up this, the number to look at is the... it'll be interesting to see the balance of these two when we do run out. God damn, I don't know why I keep stuttering like that. It was fine, like, before. I don't think it's because I'm recording. Maybe Kerbal's just been running too long and it's got some garbage collection. That actually seems pretty likely. Anyway, yeah, our goal is to go as high as possible, effectively for free. As long as we're in jet mode, the fuel cost is so low that it's effectively for free. But the other thing is, we are trying to go sideways as much as possible. You know what? There's no way. If nothing else, it's going to drive me bonkers. That's too slow. Too slow. We're going to double up on the engines. I just realized we do have 2 of the spikes, which is actually, like, more than enough air for this. Get you in here, copy you up over here. I don't think we want the twin whatevers. We do want it in the middle. I could throw another fuel tank on here, which is an interesting idea. Why don't I? Again, there's the risk that this is just going to make everything, you know, a little too heavy. Turn off symmetry mode, snap to there, grab you, go there. Now our center of lift is too far forward again. Right, because we added more weight back here. So let's go back to move mode, grab you, and slide you backwards. There we go. It's just something like that. All right, I know that's not lined up, but let's go and give this another try here. Oh, place mode, right click. Presumably you're on automatic switching. Oh, they don't match. We're gonna do that. While I'm here, I'm going to set up a hotkey. Custom 1. So action group custom 1. I'm going to click on the engine. And toggle engine. No, not toggle. That's turned on and off. Switch mode. And I'm going to also do the same thing for the second engine to make sure the link. So now if you hit the 1 key, we'll actually manually switch from one mode to another. Just in case the automatic doesn't work. Because the last thing you want to do is have only one engine switch over. While one engine, like, coughs and dies, and the other one's on, and then you go and flip out and go berserk in all kinds of different ways. So, almost twice as much thrust. I mean, we have twice as much raw thrust. We did add a little bit more weight, both by the second engine and the extra fuel tank. Let's give that a go. So once again, I will go and just turn on the fly-by-wire for slightly better controls. Okay, I'm liking the acceleration a lot more here. And 100 meters per second. Okay, just before 100 meters per second seems a good time to lift. Positive rate, gear up. Speed is climbing much, much better now. I'm so much happier with this. Of course, we only have, you know, half the sort of burn time right now, but that's okay. And actually, what I want to do is increase the... No, not this one. Of the liquid fuel tank. This one over here. There we go. So this one's going to drain first. I'm kind of curious to see how that goes. So we're getting clarity of air resistance here, which of course slows us down a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and pitch up a little to sort of balance that out. We're still increasing speed, but we're climbing faster, which will thin us out. And the reason... I'm not as concerned about the air resistance, because it's sort of a wasted fuel. But not really, because again, while in jet mode, it's sort of kind of free fuel. Not exactly, but let's pretend. Climbing, climbing, climbing. Oh, I still want to leave the air intakes up so we can take a look at those numbers. And the Rapier engine up. We're just looking at the right side of both, but that's okay. Speed continues to go up. I don't know why it's got that stutter in there now. Maybe it has something to do with the recording, but we'll see. Once we get past 10,000, the air gets a lot thinner. Actually, we'll probably see the air effects go away. Although our speed's still climbing, I'll probably go more horizontal because, again, my top concern is horizontal speed more than height. And the other thing is, the faster we go, the more thrust our engine has. Look, our engine thrust is still increasing right now. Air coming in is actually dropping slightly because the air is getting thinner. Even though we're going faster, we're getting less air in because the air is getting thinner. But the thrust continues to increase, and that's exactly what I want to see. More thrust means we go faster. We go faster, so we go more thrust. And again, it's starting to even out. I'm going to level out a bit to see if I can keep the thrust climbing. Looks like we're not going to be able to keep the thrust climbing anymore as the air gets thinner and everything. But what's important here is that our horizontal speed continues to increase. Now, obviously, things are pretty hot here, but that's okay. I mean, we're not getting any temperature bars yet, so that is very good news. But there's no other way around it. At this point, we would hit the top speed of the other setups. Both the air intakes and the engines would have dropped off considerably in thrust. We're still getting that, but not quite as much over here. It's still in air breathing mode. It's still okay. Hopefully things will automatically switch. Push comes to shove, I will hit the 1 key to manually flip over to the rocket mode here, and we'll see how it goes. Is my forward fuel tank drained? Not quite yet. That's good. That's good. That's good. We're still in air breathing mode. Thrust is rapidly decreasing as they're starting to starve out here. Speed is still increasing, but not much. I'm going to go a little bit more horizontal here just to keep the horizontal speed increasing as much as possible. It's not like we're not still climbing fast. We're climbing at slightly above 100 meters per second. So that's what, 300 feet per second multiplied by 60 is what, 1,800 feet per minute? Which, if this were an airplane, that would be a pretty darn fast rate, especially at this altitude, because you have to remember we're now at like 70,000 feet, which is twice the height of a jetliner kind of altitude. But our engines are dying and dying and dying and dying, and I'd probably switch modes right now, especially since our speed is decreasing. That being said, we're still getting some free altitude, but barely. Okay, I'm going to go and manually switch. Our engine hasn't actually died, but it's not being helpful anymore. So I'm going to hit the 1 key. Boom! We are now burning in a rocket engine mode. We've only got 1,700 meters per second delta V at this point. We're accelerating quickly. Time to apoapsis. We had actually reached our apoapsis here. It is now climbing again. And we definitely want it to climb quickly. I'm going to go ahead and pitch up at this point, because that's going to push our apoapsis further away. Oh man, it's climbing super fast. And actually, we're going so fast that we're getting heat problems here. But probably is fine. None of these are getting critical. That's what's important here. They exist, but they're not critical. And the higher we go, the thinner the air will get. Time to apoapsis is actually shot up crazy. In fact, I want to go horizontal at this point. My apoapsis is climbing too much. Wow. It's actually, I can still affect my apoapsis by pitching up and down because I still have climb here. Okay, we are... Wow. I think what's happened here is I can change a lot about my angle of flight. I think I've got to go more vertical, a little faster and a little earlier, and more about this. And just, well, even then, it actually would have been about going more horizontal, because we don't need to add more apoapsis. You can tell we're getting a lot more air resistance here than on our jet at this point, or on our rockets, which would have been higher as well, but we are losing a lot of apoapsis very, very, very quickly here. I may need to give it another go, but we're still looking to get to space right now. Yeah, I probably should have pitched a little bit more vertically, I suspect, because I think we're spending too long in too much thick air. Well, let's see. Let's see what happens. I could go into physics mode here. Probably okay. Physics warp times 4, just to be impatient. There we go. I mean, now we have no real air resistance. We're still slowing a little bit, but not very much. We are going to be going higher than I'd want. Now, Kevin, our space station, of course, is at 200 kilometers as opposed to 124 kilometers, which is what we're going for here. But we want to be in a lower orbit. Man, we've just hit space in a single stage. That's pretty amazing. We will probably not be able to rendezvous here. I don't know. Let's have MechJeb circularize for us, just to save us a little bit of twiddly bits. Circularization, create and execute. Okay, well, first things first. Our reaction wheel here is clearly not sufficient. I'm going to turn on RCS. It's really not trying to do it. Abort node execution. Pitch down. There we go. Oh, let me turn off the autopilot. That was probably it. In fact, it's entirely possible. Let me turn off the RCS. Yeah, it's fine. It was the autopilot screwing with it. The systems were fighting each other. Even without RCS, we're actually turning perfectly fine. Like it's got the two antennas, like some sort of bug here. They, of course, turn towards the sun. Power charge is good. You can accelerate. I assume you're going to slow down properly. Yeah, there we go. There's your auto time warp. Thank you very much. So we're going to confirm circularization. Now, we have 642 meters per second. I bet you doing a rendezvous would be tricky. We might not do the rendezvous this time, but what we could do is see what reentry is like. Let's find out. Okay, so that's the circularization complete. Now, if I go and set the station as a target, so we're ahead of the station, so, I mean, already we're in the wrong place. How come I can't target the station? Oh, just because the hitbox word's a little funny. There it is. Set as target. So if I asked you to home and transfer to target, create node, 19.2 meters per second? That's it? Well, we are pretty darn similar, so as long as we're patient for it, that's all it takes, I guess. Holy crap! Actually, one of the big problems we've got right now is that there's another spaceship parked there. I'm going to complete this maneuver, then we'll put in a cut and end this. I mean, first of all, how cool is this? This is like very Star Trek to have like, or more Star Wars, I guess, to have this thing looking like a, you know, jet fighter in space. It's like Battlestar Galactica. I don't know what it is. Open the front cone because we'll need it at some point. There's the time warp. So it's got a time warp for a day and a few hours, which will actually take a bit because we are limited a bit in our time warping speed over here. So tell you what, I'm going to put the cut in here. Next episode, we will, in fact, attempt to dock with this ship, resupply the space station, and then, that's no moon, and then see if we can get this thing to re-enter the atmosphere of Kerbal without burning up completely. And the big question for that will be, what is the correct angle? I don't think it's going to be nose down. I think it's going to be nose slightly up. Like, you know, 10 degrees up or something like that. I mean, mostly like flying horizontal and just a little bit of upness to try to like present a little bit of a bigger area here to slow down. Because if we go nose first, all the heat will be there, which is no good. We need more of a... We need to slow down quicker by applying as much sort of like parachute-style force as possible. But not so hard that it, say, rips our wings off or burns our wings off. Now, putting a couple of radiators on top of the wings, for example, might turn out to be something that we need to do. I don't know. But we will put in a cut here. We still got a day and 2 hours to fast forward through. So next episode, we're going to see what we can do. Thanks for watching. See you then.